My father disowned me. Then I discovered why. The day my father told me I was no longer his son, he didn't even raise his voice. That's the part one remember most. Not anger. Not shouting. Not emotion. Just silence. Cold silence. The kind that changes your life forever. He stood near the front door with his arms folded while my mother cried quietly behind him. And then he looked me directly in the eyes and said something I still hear in my head years later. Leave. And don't come back. Just like that. No explanation. No warning. No second chance. One sentence. And suddenly I no longer had a home. At first, I thought it was punishment. I thought maybe he was trying to scare me. Teach me a lesson. But days passed. Then weeks. Then months. And he never called. Never checked on me. Never asked where I was. It was like I had died while still alive. And honestly, that hurt more than anything. Because when someone hates you, at least there's emotion involved. But indifference? Indifference makes you feel invisible. Growing up, my father was never affectionate. He wasn't the kind of man who hugged you or told you he loved you. Everything with him was strict. Controlled. Structured. He believed emotions made people weak. And I spent most of my childhood trying to become the kind of son he would finally be proud of. Good grades. Good behavior. No trouble. No complaints. I did everything right. At least I thought I did. But no matter what I achieved, something always felt distant between us. Like he was looking at me, but seeing someone else. Back then, I didn't understand it. Now I do. The night everything changed started with something small. A family dinner. Normal conversation. Normal atmosphere. At least in the beginning. My mother was talking about relatives visiting during the holidays. My younger sister was laughing about something at school. And my father sat quietly eating like always. Then somehow the conversation shifted toward my future. College. Work. Responsibility. The usual. But that night felt different. Because every answer I gave seemed to irritate him more. Every word I spoke made his expression colder. Until finally, he slammed his hand against the table so hard the glasses shook. The entire room froze. And then he looked directly at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not disappointment. Not anger. Something deeper. Something personal. You are exactly like him. That's what he said. And for a second, nobody moved. Because nobody knew what he meant. Including me. I asked him what he was talking about. But instead of answering, he stood up and walked away. And from that night forward, something changed permanently between us. He barely spoke to me. Barely looked at me. The tension inside that house became unbearable. It felt like I was living beside someone who secretly hated me. And eventually, that hatred exploded. A few months later, we argued again. This time it started over something stupid. A missed phone call. That's all. But somehow it turned into the biggest fight of my life. He accused me of being selfish. Ungrateful. Weak. I yelled back. For the first time in my life. I yelled back. And maybe that was the moment everything broke. Because his face changed instantly. Not shocked. Not angry. Just done. Like he had finally reached the end of something he'd been carrying for years. Then came the sentence that destroyed everything. You are not my son anymore. And just like that, I lost my father. I wish I could say I handled it well. I didn't. I was angry. Confused. Humiliated. I kept replaying the moment in my head over and over, trying to understand what I had done that was so unforgivable. But no answer ever came. And eventually, anger turned into emptiness. I stopped trying to contact him. Stopped trying to fix things. Because you can only beg for love for so long before your pride finally bleeds out. Years passed. And during those years, I built a completely different life. Small apartment. Long work hours. No family gatherings. No holidays. No father. Sometimes I convinced myself I didn't care anymore. But deep down, I did. Because no matter how old you get, a part of you still wants your parents to choose you. And mine didn't. At least that's what I believed. Until the phone call came. It was my mother. I almost didn't answer. But something about the time of night made my stomach tighten. And the second I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. My father was sick. Very sick. She said he wanted to see me. At first, I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it felt cruel. After years of silence, now he wanted me? Now? But despite everything, I went. And honestly, part of me hated myself for going. When I walked into that hospital room, I barely recognized him. The man who once felt larger than life suddenly looked small. Fragile. Human. And for the first time in my life, my father looked afraid. Not of me. Of time. He stared at me for a long moment before speaking. And when he finally did, his voice barely sounded like his own. There's something you deserve to know. At first, I thought he was finally going to apologize. Explain himself. Tell me why he threw me away like I meant nothing. But instead, he told me a story. A story about my mother. About a man from years ago. About suspicion. Doubt. And betrayal. Then finally, he said the sentence that made my entire body go numb. I never believed you were mine. I couldn't breathe. I just stared at him. Certain I had heard him wrong. But he kept talking. Years earlier, before I was born, my mother had briefly been involved with someone else during a separation in their marriage. And even though they reconciled, my father never truly moved past it. Then I was born. And according to him, every time he looked at me, he saw uncertainty. Not certainty. And eventually that uncertainty turned into resentment. Then resentment became distance. And distance became rejection. I looked at my mother standing quietly in the corner of the room, crying silently. And suddenly my entire childhood started rearranging itself in my mind. Every cold moment. Every distant stare. Every impossible standard. Every emotional wall. It suddenly made sense. And somehow, that hurt even more. Because all those years, I thought I wasn't enough. When really, I was being punished for something that had nothing to do with me. I asked him one question. Why didn't you just get a DNA test? The room became silent. And honestly, his answer destroyed me more than everything else combined. Because he looked down and whispered. I was afraid of the answer. Not angry. Not defensive. Afraid. And in that moment I realized something tragic. My father didn't destroy our relationship because he knew the truth. He destroyed it because he was too afraid to face it. A few days later, the DNA results came back. And they proved something neither of us was prepared for. I was his son. Biologically. Completely. And when the doctor confirmed it, my father cried. For the first time in my entire life, I saw my father cry. Not quietly. Not politely. He broke. Completely. Because in one moment, he realized something irreversible. He had spent years punishing his own son for a fear that wasn't even real. He tried apologizing after that. Repeatedly. But some damage changes shape too deeply to disappear. And honestly, I didn't know what to feel anymore. Part of me pitied him. Part of me hated him. Part of me mourned the relationship we could have had. But another part of me was just tired. Tired of carrying pain that started before I even understood what pain was. Before he died, he asked me one final question. Do you think you can ever forgive me? And to this day, I still don't know if my answer was honest. Because I told him I would try. But trying and succeeding are two completely different things. Sometimes I still think about him. About fear. About pride. About how one unanswered doubt can poison an entire family for decades. And honestly, that's the part that scares me the most. Not hatred. Not betrayal. Fear. Because fear turns people into strangers long before they realize what they're losing. So after hearing all of this, do you think he was right or wrong? Share your thoughts in the comment section. And subscribe for more.